Wow, where do we go from here? Great presentation from General Mills, from Ryan, and it's kind of unnerved me a little bit because what we're going to now do is go back in time about 3 years, I'm afraid. So one of the things that Ryan talked about was the lift and shift and then the research on research and some of the problems that General Mills had in kind of mobile adoption. So if I go back, what we wanted to do is do that research on research. So Edward and I have kind of looked at mobile versus online. So we're looking at shopper insights, we're looking at some product testing. So hopefully we can give you a little bit more color as to why General Mills decided to move in the direction that they did 2-3 years back. Who we are, so from uSamp's side, we are an audience and technology company. So I guess the audience side of that would be panels, both mobile and online. So we have around 90 countries covered in both of those. And the technology side of it would then be anything from mobile apps through to survey programming. So we can be mode agnostic and we can handle the technology on both, which is why I thought it was relevant to kind of stand here and do the comparison. Edward, you can introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm a client-side researcher, and I was with most recently Avery Dennison, and I'm going to stay client-side as from next Wednesday going FMCG, but right now I'm still independent, so I think the word independence has some value, even though certain people didn't quite understand that last night.
Speaking of last night, hands up how many people had a good night and wish they had another coffee right now? We have a flawed panel. Fraudulent respondents, I suspect. So how do we come together, Edward?
I think sort of like, like minds think great things, right? So we're both curious. Lots of hype about mobile, that's what made me curious. Where's the bullshit? What can mobile do that online doesn't? What's it cost? What should it cost? Where could it get? Is it like Heineken gets a place other things can't reach? So validation. So cool stuff. And Ben, I really appreciate your interest. The book, yeah.
Yep.
I wrote a book. Curiosity killed a cat, didn't kill me. What are various people, the likes of TNS, big respect for Kantar, validating mobile globally? What are the small ones doing? What are the qualitative ones doing? So a lot of people in this room, and collated it, saying why we're lagging. Why is it still the case that mobile panels are not being used across Europe? Take-up is still very small. Why? Are we too conservative? Are we afraid of going from 25 minutes, 45 minutes to 8? What's holding us back? So I documented that. And as Ben would like to say, I still haven't given him a copy, but he'll get it after this presentation.
So I can't endorse the book yet, I'm afraid. Haven't read it. You won't share it with me. Okay, so the study background. We put mobile in the blue corner and we put online in the red corner. We paired them up and we went head to head. So what we tried to do is remove all other obstacles that could construe bias in either way. So the survey design was identical, and I'm going to talk through the methodology in a second. The sample frames were identical. Everything was identical except for the mode. So whether a person is taking the survey on a mobile phone or on a laptop or desktop, and they were mutually exclusive cells. So we know that there was no crossover. So the hypotheses that we went into it with were, well, mobile is preferable for shopper and shoppability. It gets closer to the moment, and it delivers POS, truth and evidence. And I think Ryan would probably testify again to this. But let's show you what we found. And then on the iHut side, on the product test in-home, does it deliver more granular results? We had an overarching question. We were genuinely curious here about things like richer insights. So how do you measure that? Well, let's look at open ends. So we were pretty heavy on open ends. We laid in 4 across the study. Probably too many, but let's see how mobile versus online panelists behave with those open ends. And we'll show you some of the results in a bit. So the methodology was a 3-stage. We did a screener. We were looking for people that wanted to eat crisps, or if you're American, chips. So we screened out for those particular people that would be shopping for them. We then did an in-store shop. On mobile, that in-store shop was then geo-fenced and geo-validated. They had to be in the stores that we wanted them to be in to start the survey. With online, of course, we're relying on their memory, their recall. Were they there? What do they remember of their store visit? And then again, with product test, once they'd purchased the crisps, we asked them to eat them, and then as soon as, or as close to the moment as they could, take then the follow-up survey, and that follow-up survey again online was desktop, and then mobile was on their device at the time. Important also to know we layered in not just the open ends, we put a horrible 5-point scale grid in there with about 9 or 10 rotations. You'd think pretty ugly for a mobile device. Let's try it. Come back to Ryan's point about the lift and shift. Well, let's lift a horrible online question and put it onto a mobile device. So that was quite interesting as well. The flavors, so we went after prawn cocktail in the UK. We went after cheesy garlic bread flavor in the US. We tried to be divisive. We wanted to find the products that weren't just mainstream that everybody liked. Let's see if we can elicit a little bit more emotion, a little bit more of a response from the products that we chose. So let's talk about recruitment and the overall field work that we experienced. So here's our sampling ambition. So we aimed for 150 per cell. So mobile versus online, US versus UK. We achieved more than that in desktop because the pass-through rate was higher than we thought. We screened more than we needed. In mobile, we had a heck of a time. And I'll come on to the why in the next slide. So in mobile, it took us 2 weeks to field this. And it took us less than a week to field it in online. So there's, I guess, some irony is that, you know, we talk of mobile in the moment, but actually it wasn't quite in the moment. It took us a little longer. Why? Well, here's the stats. I don't mind sharing this with you guys. So we had a bit of screener dropout. That's pretty normal. In-store dropout. Look at the difference between mobile and online in-store dropouts. So we looked into that. Why were people dropping out in-store? Well, I'll tell you why. It's the small things that count. We asked them in-store or mobile to take a photo. That's where we lost most of the people. They didn't have the time or the inclination to actually stand and take a photo. On product test dropouts, again, huge differences. We looked at that data. Most of that was people not wanting to wait the 10 or 15 seconds for the study to download onto the device. It downloads on the device, by the way, so that it's then native, so that if they drop out of a single area, they can still take the survey. So on mobile, we found people are just impatient. But once you've got them, and we think the quality is better. So if you look at the IR compared to the start-complete ratio, really different results. What it tells us basically is that mobile is a lot harder, and you've got to allow a lot more entries into the survey per se, getting the results at the end. So quite fascinating fieldwork. We also found that we don't think it's yet suited for the 45 plus. We know that 45 plus people eat crisps, absolutely. But getting them on an app and getting them to go through this 3-stage process was really difficult. We aimed for it in terms of sample frame. In the end, we couldn't quite get there. And we actually found that we couldn't even weight against it because of the base sizes. So the answer would be we either build a bigger panel or we have more time. But it's just a word of caution. Mobile isn't necessarily going to do you big sample frames nat rep when you've got 10% IRs. So that's what we found from the fieldwork perspective. So it sounds like mobile's tough, right? It's harder than online. Why would we do that? Participant experience-wise, it was fine. Survey length was comparable. It was a 2-minute screener, a 3-minute in-store, I think an extra minute for the mobile because they were taking photos, and then the product test was another 2 minutes. They enjoyed the experience just as much mobile as online. So there's nothing in there to suggest that the data should be any different across the two modes. So Edward, how did the results turn out?
Indeed. So first of all, we'll start with the shopping experience, where we asked a limited number of questions. It was a very manageable survey. It wasn't gamified whatsoever. And for me, one of the very interesting shifts in data point from desktop, laptop to mobile is that people rely on their memory. And you have things like brand halo effect or just, I can't quite remember. So we asked them, where were the Lay's cheesy garlic bread chips on the shelf? And if you look at the mobile distribution, you see that 57% said they were actually at the bottom of the shelf, and that suggests you have to bend down. A lot of price cutting goes on at the bottom. And the online people said, no, it wasn't the problem at all. We had 83% in the middle, which is cool. Now imagine if you're a trade marketing person responsible for the shelf positioning, and you're looking at this data. Which do you believe, left or right? On the right, you say, I'm doing a great job, and no real worries. And on the left, you say, oh, I've drifted down. Is that deliberate? Did we want it to happen? Or is it something happened with our trade partners which I didn't know? Which do you believe? Which is more accurate? And this is where the 2 weeks and the in-store difficulty of taking photographs became extremely valuable because you have visual evidence, and we are bad recorders of our own behavior. And the visual truth says, well, here we are. How many photos do we have here, Ben?
In the US alone, we have 300 photos.
So you have a lot of data that you can say, well, you have to look at it, but where were the crisps evidence? And the crisps were at the bottom. So for me, I would say if I've got an online-based shoppability survey, which is telling me data about presence in shelf, I shouldn't believe it, because this is, in this particular instance, the mobile is saying, no, we're at the bottom, we're not in the middle. So essentially, the mode gives me greater accuracy. So the cost issue and the time issue probably going to be justified. This is another question which we have different distribution of responses. This is now in the UK. We asked people, from the moment you entered the store, how long did it take you to find the Walker Prawn Cocktail Crisp? This is a really important question. If you're responsible for your category, and you're worried that your category is in a space in the store that people don't find it quickly enough, then this question is really relevant to you. How quickly do people find it? Look at the difference in responses. If you have the online, the desktop on the right, you're sort of like saying, actually, it could be a problem. 29%, I'd say, over 3 to 4 minutes. I'm wandering around in the supermarket. I'm getting fed up. Whereas mobile gives you a different pattern of responses. It's like, actually, it's not a problem. So the memory issue that mobile can overcome is a big one. Again, these are massive, massive issues. If you go to your retail partner and say, we'd like to change your store layout, he'd say, right, come back in 5 years' time. But it's really important. If people can't find you, then you find that in 6 months they're saying you don't sell out. Your problem becomes this one. So mobile is very powerful, and online is potentially misleading. So this is a wonderful photograph, and it's not meant to sensitize to obesity at all. But so how did the product testing, the wonderful word iHeart, how did it work out, mobile versus desktop, laptop? The suspicion I had with that being closer to the moment might change people's responses in terms of enjoyment ratings and expectations versus packaging. So we asked them, when did you eat the crisps? And was in the last 5 to 10 minutes, down to longer than 8 hours ago. And you see a totally different response. And we asked people to say, please take the survey as soon as you possibly can after you've eaten the wonderful crisps. And people didn't. But the mobile did, so 44%, almost 1 in 2 of the last, so very recent, versus 1 in 3, 1 in 4, almost half online who are doing it from memory. Did this make a difference? So the memory gap. And to my great surprise, we had a classical just about right, a sensory scale. On a mobile, it was in a grid. I didn't want to do a grid because I thought I hate grids. But Ben said, we're going to test a grid on mobile. And will it work, will it not work? What happened to dropout rates, flatlining, that kind of stuff. And we didn't actually see much difference in the taxonomy of the results. I just pointed out one here because I thought, okay, maybe mobile is slightly indicating they have a flavor issue. This is just about right. This is the percentage saying it's fine. But in fact, very little difference. So kind of like, wow, I thought, so these extra 2 weeks, and Ben's going to talk about money in a minute, I didn't really need it for iHearts, do I? But, and this was kind of like one of the killer ones for me, it's purchase intent. Now, our friends at Kantar and TNS often say that there's no correlation between purchase intent and actual behavior. However, it still gets used as a metric. And this one kind of like really worried me. Look at the definitely would buy comparative scores. UK mobile, UK online, 39 versus 48. It's not significant because the base size is about 100, but it's wobbly. It's almost getting there. But 25 to 48 probably is USA mobile online. So you say, okay, which, like, the truth, somebody uses the word the truth, right? So I'm agnostic, but who's going to get us closer to what is actually going to happen? Because they're suggesting 2 very different things. The online says, if I had a calibrative metric of, say, top box should get me, I don't know, 35%, I get a green light, right? So no, you don't. You get 25%. What do I do? So mobile is going to say it's a different take. The mode changes it. And we tried to say, well, what's going on here? Is it recency? So we cut the data by recency. It wasn't recency, because I thought maybe the people that are more recent have a more accurate memory. Didn't change the figures whatsoever. Is it the fact that the people in mobile are more switched on, they're enjoying the survey more? We didn't have any evidence for that. Enjoyment levels were identical. What is going on? We'll come on to that. Because we didn't, to be honest with you, we didn't completely manage to find the answer. We cut it in different ways. I'll shift to diagnostic length. I was skeptical. How comfortable do you feel saying 4 open-enders in a mobile survey? How many people would say, not a problem? I would say, yes, it's a problem, because you don't like fiddling around with your phone. Using predictive texting, you get it wrong, you correct it, it's fiddly. We put in 4. Look at those differences. It's a horrible chart, but all I wanted to say is there's pretty little difference between with a, what would you call it, a keyboard and your touch screen. These are the number of words typed to the 4 open-enders. So we had 1 in the shop. And there you can see, in the UK, we had a difference of about 1.5 words, isn't it? Something like that, a bit more, 2 words. So in store, you have a bit less people fiddling around in the UK with their phones, fine. But otherwise, it's very similar. So mobile is giving me, if you say length of text, is giving me pretty identical results, which was to me a surprise. Is this because young people text faster than I do? I don't know. Maybe they do. They're quicker. It could be. They're gamers. This one was the real killer for me, though. This was like, because mainly sort of the open-enders and quant studies are useless, because they give you very little richness of feedback. Look at this. This is mobile. I just took the first 10. We had 100 of these, and in the USA, we had more than 100, right? Yeah. Hundreds. Look at the first 10. Look at the detail level on the right-hand side, and look at the left-hand side. And what does that tell me? It tells me on the left-hand side, what do you do with nothing? In other words, I've done this question 100 times, nothing. It's a quick answer. On the right-hand side, we've got nothing really enjoyed them, like saying, why would you bother to write 5 words? Because you want to. Somehow you're more engaged. That was kind of my takeout. If I have R&D sitting next to me saying, oh, OK, let's go through them together. Let's actually read the open-enders. You should do. You have richness on the right-hand side. The cheese flavor was really fake. I felt the taste could be bolder, the garlic taste. They were a little greasy. I wish there were more in the bag. It was like, this is richness I would have thought that a mobile device would not give me. And actually, it gave me better richness. This could be just this category because it's crisp, it's reasonably high interest, but it's partly habitualized. How often do I think about a crisp? Not really. This is not perfume, this is not lingerie, it's crisps. But it was kind of like impressive, and I thought, cool, this is amazing. What's it worth? And that's kind of like the question we're going to come on to. We're getting on to the conclusions. I'll hand back to Ben.
So I guess we have a few conclusions here. Hopefully reasonably obvious ones from our perspective anyway. So for shoppability, in-store, the big thing for us was the photo evidence. When you have online saying, yeah, the crisps were in the middle of the shelf, and then we have 300 photos saying, no, they weren't, that's kind of scary. And by the way, we're an online panel as well as a mobile panel, so we're panel agnostic. And I'm not necessarily saying that our online panel's terrible and our mobile panel's amazing. What I'm saying is the memory recall is the thing at play here. That's where mobile cuts through that and gets to the truth. So we know that in store, you're going to get a much more accurate result. We also believe that when you're doing things like product tests, the diagnostic power of things like open ends, as Edward was just talking about, that lends itself as well to mobile. We think that mobile technology is more exciting, it's more interesting. People are living on them. Again, as Ryan was saying, people want to be on their phones all the time. So we're getting more richness of information through a mobile. Here's the but. The but is what I talked about earlier. It was harder. Now, admittedly, we went after supermarkets or supercenters. We wanted to keep the methodology the same, so we could have widened that out to other outlets, other vendors. We could have widened it out to other flavors of crisps or whatever it might be. So we had low incidences, we had tough GOs. So we could have done things to speed the field work up. But nonetheless, in this particular study, it was longer and more difficult to run mobile. Longer and more difficult means more expensive. So does Edward want to, wait a little bit longer and pay more money for mobile?
Right. So the first question is, what does it cost and is it worth it? So that's the question I put to Ben. I said, well, how much more is a mobile survey going to cost me? And he said it's about 55%. So then he said, okay, 55% on $1,000 is nothing. On 100,000, that's a lot of money. So that's the first in the absolute terms. The second work, what's driving our industry is speed. So the initial top was like, you're more expensive and you're taking longer, like go back to your cupboard and come back to me. But then I think, okay, look at the richness of the diagnostics. It's really cool. And look at the inaccuracy of online and memory recall for in-store. Like I would never, ever say in-store, if I don't use mobile, I'm doing something dangerous. And the diagnostic power of mobile really convinced me. Then I have the purchase intent. And I've read stuff, and maybe we need more research here, that says actually the predictive power of mobile is higher than online. So I said, I don't have the evidence here to say that I would believe mobile, but it would, from using other sources, I would go mobile. So I would do the traditional thing. I said, Ben, still too expensive, and I still want it faster. So you beat him up. But basically, I would say mobile seems good.
Thanks, Edward. He beat me up. Great. My final comment, so I don't know if those of you have seen the agenda. I'm running a workshop tomorrow with Mark and the MMRA. What we're going to do in that workshop is we're going to recreate some research on research, and we're going to crowdsource it. So if anybody in the room is not signed up that wants to do some of this, maybe on a different product or a different category or anything like that, feel free to come along. We'll try and get that into another piece of research on research. We're aiming to get that at least designed tomorrow, and then we'll go away and run it over the next 2-3 weeks and feed those results back as well. So if you've got some burning questions in your particular area, feel free to come along tomorrow morning and we'll see if we can answer them for you. That's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben and Edward. Have we got any questions from the floor for Ben and Edward? Mark?
Was this panel already recruited as mobile, for instance, part of your mobile army, or were they fresh recruits, not necessarily mobile?
The panels were recruited as such in advance. So yes, in the online case, it was our online panels, both US and the UK. And then in mobile, it was what we call a mobile army, so our mobile panels. So that means people that have already signed up, downloaded our mobile apps. So they were already, I guess, preconditioned to the mode. But yeah, we didn't do any online recruitment to mobile to get it done.
We try to make the samples as comparable as possible. There are obviously going to be some differences that say this is not the only variable, but we try to minimize them. So like, which supermarket did you go to? They were not completely identical. But we're talking about in the UK the difference between Tesco and, say, Sainsbury's. So we try to minimize it. Is that the same thing? Possibly not. And we had 100 people, so it's not a huge sample size. But in the US, it was reasonable. It was 200. So we tried our best to isolate a variable and to try to make the comparison. We didn't weight the data. We had more women in the US. We just left it. So that would be one question. Should we weight the data? We could have done that, but I just thought, no, this is research and research. Just leave it as it is. So it's unweighted data.
Any other questions for Ben and Edward? Walter. Microphone.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and it's more a remark than a question that I have. I would like to thank you very much that you took this misunderstanding from mobile. Up to now, we all thought that mobile is, of course, smarter and quicker and more predictive, and now you tell us that it's not cheaper, but it's price premium. And I think for us as a market, a market research industry, it's essential to have an argument for mobile, but also to say it's not cheaper, it's not quick and dirty, but it's premium. Thank you for this.
Any more questions? I just got a quick question. Edward, you were talking about the granularity of the open-end responses on mobile versus online. Wasn't quite sure as to why that was. You said yourself not quite sure yet why that was. And Wondering what your top of mind thoughts were.
I just wonder, how long have the people on the online panel, desktop, laptop, been on that panel? You have churn of, what, 20% per year? Some of them will be doing these things maybe slightly more often than they might have been. The mobile panel is likely to be fresher, I guess. What?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah,
Three,
it'd be fresher.
3 years old, something like that. Yeah. And maybe you just have more fun with this little baby than you do, which is something which is becoming antiquated, which is one that Mark's got there. This is kind of like, going to become technical history. So maybe you're just enjoying yourself. You've just been on YouTube. You've just sort of like texted your friend. And somebody's saying, open-ended, yeah, why not? You're just listening to the BBC radio because it can do everything. I don't know, but they seem fresher to me. And these are people saying, I could say one word and I got 4. Why would you do that? You have to be enjoying it somehow, even though the enjoyment ratings didn't confirm that. Did you enjoy the survey? And it was like, no, they were actually identical, but the diagnostics were better. And that was just a cut of 10. The rest was the same. It was like, what? I've never seen that before. People are awake? Wow. How cool is that?
I would also add that that's consistent with other studies that we've run as well. So when I first put that to Edward as our methodology design, he was fairly skeptical. That's why we threw more open ends in. And yeah, it proved out exactly as we've seen on more or less every other mobile study that we've run. In this particular piece of research, no, but we have done quite a lot of it. I don't want to stand up here and talk for too long, but we've done quite a lot of kind of quant-qual blend, ethnographic type work. We've had people uploading 20-minute videos about their bad hair day experience, that kind of thing. So yeah, the attachment to the mobile device is strong, and we see that on almost every study that we run.
Very good. Okay, we're going to take one more question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. Well, thanks again for the presentation. But I was wondering, and one of the things that you said strikes me a little bit, the fact that people are enjoying probably more the filling out of surveys on the mobile, so there is much more joy, optimism, mindset. Isn't it dangerous then to ask for a buying intent? Because maybe just the mood they are in is so, positive that maybe, they are less critical, less severe.
That's why we asked the enjoyment of the survey. Then we asked enjoyment of the crisps. We asked expectations versus packaging designs. We had the sensory evaluations. There were no differences. And I thought, so why is the purchase intent? What do I do with purchase intent? What do I do with it? Is that wrong question to ask? Maybe it is. TNS says it's the wrong question to ask. I'm not quite sure what the right question to ask is. If it has zero correlation to, that's what you guys always say, if it has zero correlation to behavior, I shouldn't ask the question. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what question do I ask if I need to calibrate? So for me, I would need to validate it further versus actual behavior. So I need a panel of actual behavior where I can put this attitudinal data on top of it and saying which is bullshit, which is not. And I don't have that data right now. But I couldn't take a decision based on that, and I wouldn't know which to believe, but I would go towards more. I have satisficing, that's the word, isn't it, on online. And mobile, I have less, and I'd be inclined to believe the mobile. But can I justify that? No, not yet.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ben and Edward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.